What makes Ork technology so bizarre and terrifying is how it works. The old ones, which are godlike beings that seeded life in the galaxy, engineered the Orks during the war in heaven. Well, actually they were called Kroks, but they then devolved into Orks. So they were genetically or biologically engineered to be hardwired for war, which includes their ability to collectively believe machines into working, which is strange but okay. Ork technology defies logic and physics. Red vehicles actually go faster because Orks believe red makes things faster. Bullets fight from rusty, misshapen guns, hit targets and explode because Orks believe they should. If a human tried to use Ork technology, it'll explode, jam or just fall apart. But in Ork hands, it's a fully functional death machine. This means an Ork Mek can slap together a warp-capable spaceship with scrap metal, a few wires, and a whole bunch of shouted instructions, and it'll actually fly through space and shoot dakka if enough Orks around it believe it can. It's not engineered in the traditional sense, it's a mass delusion turned into physics, breaking reality. And it's one of the reasons why the Orks, for all their comic absurdity, are amongst the most dangerous threats in the galaxy. So that's how Ork ships are created, or rather improved by the Greenskins. Now let's dive into the biggest Ork spacecrafts ever recorded by the Imperium. Let's begin! We begin here with the light cruiser. So these in Warhammer 40k are large warships used by the Orks, the Greenskins, and they come in various chaotic, brutal and frankly hilarious configurations. Unlike the structured gothic elegance of Imperial Navy ships, Ork cruisers look like flying junkyards with guns bolted on wherever there's space, and sometimes where there isn't space. The light cruisers is one of the smaller classes, but still bigger than the rest, roughly equivalent to an Imperial light cruiser in size and battlefield role. And if you're wondering, humans use the word cruiser, C-R-U-I-S-E-R, while the Orks call them cruisers with K-R-O-O-Z-E-R. So that's that. So they were first seen en masse during the Third War for Armageddon. These light cruisers were often coupled together from looted Imperial vessels like the Dauntless or the Endeavour-class hulls, then improved the Ork way with crude armor plating, massive engines for ramming, and weapons that range from comically oversized cannons to unpredictable energy weapons. Every ship is unique because no two mech boys, which are Ork engineers, built the same way, which makes the Greenskins the ultimate Pimmarat boys. Then the most famous spacecrafts of the Orks are the Ork rocks. These things start off as giant space rocks, which are asteroids and meteors, or meteoroids, whatever, which Ork mech boys, their version of engineers if you can call them that, hollow out and jam them full of crude engines, giant guns and whatever random weapons they can scavenge or slap together. They're not sleek in any sense, nor fast nor maneuverable. In fact, they don't even have warp engines, which are the Ork versions of Imperial warp drives. Rocks just kinda drift from one star system to another, carried by solar winds and bad decisions. In space battles, rocks are painfully slow, and about as steerable as a drunk elephant on a unicycle, but here's the catch. They're so absurdly tough and ridiculously armored that most enemies can't figure out where to shoot or disable them. There's no clear weak spot nor subsystem to target because everything is just bolted together randomly and somehow still works. So rocks keep firing their ridiculous amounts of dakka until they explode or hit something really hard. But the real fun is when the Orks crash them on purpose. They aim these at a planet and just let gravity do the rest. These things hit like continent-smashing meteors, turning cities and even continents into craters, frying defenses and generally causing carnage that Orks find absolutely delightful. And there are different types of rocks, the small ones, the big rocks and the mega rocks, and as how they are classified according to size for the Orks, well, that's the right question, isn't it? But some have been reported to be close to 4 kilometers in size. Then back to cruisers, we have here the kill cruiser, which is something that can be passed off as a standard cruiser in Ork spacefaring terms, which is to say, it's a flying heap of stolen parts, brute force weapons and loud noises even in space, but with enough regularity as to actually be able to classify it as a type of ship. These hulking ones are usually built from the wrecks of destroyed Imperial or Chaos cruisers. They are hammered back together into shape by Ork mech boys with whatever armor and guns they can get their hands upon. Their defining features? Well, thick armor on the front, great for ramming things head-on, a staggering number of dakka spewing guns, and often a few torpedo launchers, which are tossed in for good measure. Subtle they are not. During the Third War for Armageddon, these cruisers or bruisers formed the backbone of Warlord Ghazghkull Mak Uruk Thraka's massive void fleet. One of the most infamous kill cruiser is the Butcher. It was the only Ork cruiser to be positively identified multiple times by Imperial Navy Intel during the Gothic War, not the Third War for Armageddon. Most other cruisers kept changing so much due to random improvements by the mech boys that they were basically unrecognizable the second time they were encountered. The Butcher racked up an impressive kill count, ambushing convoys in a sector of space called the Quinnox Sound, obliterating escorts, transports, and even the cruiser called Admiral Lennox. Then we also have a terror ship, which is a twisted, hilariously terrifying cousin of the standard kill cruiser. Instead of packing broadside batteries of heavy guns like the kill cruiser, terror ships are modified to act as crude carriers. Ork Mek boys literally rip out massive chunks of the ship's sides and install ramshackle launch bays, turning these vessels into mobile garbage launchers full of junky armed Ork aircraft. Built as usual from the half-digested remains of Imperial and Chaos cruisers, terror ships prioritize launching wave after wave of fighter bombers and assault boats, which are even more ridiculously dangerous for boarding enemy vessels. In one instance during the raid on Mirabel, 2 terror ships and a handful of Ork escorts showed up uninvited, parked themselves around the system's moon, and just started launching greenskin-packed assault boats over and over. The poor resupply base in Mirabel barely stood a chance. Now bigger than these are the Hammer battle cruisers. This is what happens when Orks get their hands on the bigger Imperial battle cruisers. They were first spotted during the early stages of the Third War for Armageddon. These massive Ork cruisers quickly earn a reputation for punching way above their weight, and sometimes literally by tearing through Imperial fleets with brutal efficiency and ramming. Like other Ork vessels, they're built from salvage wrecks, but the Hammer-class battle cruisers specifically scavenge the hulls of ships once armed with Nova cannons, which are gigantic long-range guns used by the Imperium. Size-wise, these things are no joke. Some hammers have been refitted and patched up so many times they've reached the scale of Imperial battleships, measuring 5 to 8 kilometers long and weighing 30 megatons, which is roughly the size of a mid-sized city fused with a tank. They can accelerate at 2.7 gravities, which is fast enough to get these space brutes moving with an alarming speed, given their mass. Because they're so huge and powerful, Hammer battlecruisers are often used as flagships by Ork war bosses, especially those who want to flaunt their power. One of the most notable users is the Great Despot of Dregruk, whose empire seems to mass-produce these monstrosities with an unnerving regularity. Then above the battlecruisers are the battleships. So these are what the Orks might cheerfully yell a dreadnought, which is their terms for dreadnought. And it isn't something the Greenskins deliberately built from the ground up, the way the Imperium does. Instead, it's what happens when an already huge Ork ship, usually a Hammer-class battlecruiser, gets patched up again and again, bolted onto, and generally inflated over time with more guns, more engines, more armor, and whatever else the mech boys can find lying around. These ships evolve like junkyard beasts, growing larger and more dangerous with every raid, salvage haul, or brilliant mech boy invention that doesn't explode immediately. During the Third War for Armageddon, several of these overgrown Hammer-class ships became so big and so devastating that the Imperial Navy had no choice but to classify them as actual battleships, size-wise, not, design-wise. Ork dreadnoughts are often the centerpieces of massive war, acting as both mobile fortresses and status symbols for their biggest, meanest war bosses. The Slambaster, an infamous example, was built on a captured Gothic-class cruiser and thus would be more than 5 kilometers at the very least, and the battleship of the Overfiend called Gorbak had the base hulk as a Dominator-class cruiser, which would make it roughly a similar size, depending on the Ork improvements. The Star Crusher of war boss God Stomper was bigger than any of the Space Wolf Strike Fleet cruisers and ships that it battled against, which says a lot just like that, doesn't it? Now above these are the Space Hulks. These in the grimdark are terrifying drifting monstrosities of the void. They are massive conglomerations of broken ships, lost technology, and ancient horrors all fused together. They're not built, but they accumulate, forming over centuries or even millennia when derelict vessels, space stations, and void crafts debris collide or get sucked into the warp or may be lost in the void, only to reappear somewhere else in real space, usually at the worst possible moment. Think of a space hulk as a haunted graveyard the size of a mountain, floating through space, crawling with things that should not be. Some of these hulks are dozens of kilometers long, bigger than battleships or even hive cities. The Imperium fears these, and some even covet the space hulks in equal measure. On the one hand, they can contain priceless, lost relics, ancient technology, and even entire data crypts that will make the Adeptus Mechanicus pre-cum in their pants. On the other hand, they're breeding grounds for gene-stealer cults and warp-tainted beasts. Orks, being orks, see space hulks a bit differently. They love salvaging these behemoths, slapping engines onto them, bolting in more dakka, and using them as battering rams or invasion barges. It doesn't matter that they're half-possessed or fused with demons. If it moves and it explodes, well, perfect. Now let's take a look at a few of these space hulks. See, there is this one legendary orc-infested space hulk of the Iron Claw clan. The Revenant Rex was its name, and it wasn't just a warship, it was practically a cosmic cryptid. Plaguing the ultimate segmentum for millennia, it was an amalgamation of shattered vessels from long-dead Xenos civilizations, also geological materials not even from the galaxy, and frozen ice believed by some mad scholars to predate time itself. Then there is the World Killer, which is probably the most infamous Ork space hulk. It was the launch platform for Gaskell Mak Uruk Thraka's second war for Armageddon. Once just being another cursed wreck orbiting the planet called Ork, it was filled with demons thanks to a warp rift at its core. But Gaskell, still rising in power, boarded the hulk and defeated a bloodthirster, and then headbutted the warp rift shut. Yeah, headbutt. That's the Ork problem-solving way in a nutshell. And then later, he sent this orkified hulk straight into the heart of Armageddon, using it as a glorified meteor and a troop carrier, annihilating the defenses and beginning one of the most brutal invasions of Armageddon in Imperial history. Also, we have the Misery's Daughter, which is creepy even by Space Hulk standards. The Misery's Daughter was first recorded in M38, in 343 of M38, and has been a recurring nightmare ever since. It's a Frankenstein's monster of shipwrecks, which includes Imperial Mechanical Space Marine and Xenos vessels, all fused into a floating labyrinth. Notable embedded wrecks include the Matriovska Hesperlax, a macro conveyor ship which is over 8 to 10 kilometers long. Then there's the Almagus, a 3.2 kilometer Mechanicus Explorator ship, and even an Astartes warship, which makes it at least twice as big as the biggest class of Imperial battleships, aside from the Glorianas. And also deep inside the hulk lies a mysterious needle-like ship made of unknown crystals, a ship that doesn't even match any known technology. Then, lastly, we also have another space hulk called the Tyrant Immortal, which is known to the Orks as the Blaster or Gork. This monstrosity was taken over by the Orks sometime before the Third War for Armageddon, having been liberated from Genestealer infestation in the only way the Orks know how to, in a fun and violent way. Over centuries, the Orks made so many modifications that by the time the Imperial Navy saw it again, it was nearly unrecognizable. Weighing over 4 million tons, the beast of a hulk could match slow-moving Imperial capital ships in a straight-line speed, which is a terrifying thought for a space junkyard full of guns, greenskins, and a bad attitude. But nothing beats the attack moons in size. These were basically flying weaponized planetoids of doom created by the biggest and baddest Orks during the War of the Beasts in M32, which were almost crocs. So imagine a hollow moon with a giant snarling Ork face that talks, moves, and fires a gravity super weapon strong enough to crush Imperial battleships like soda cans. These moons weren't just ships, they were the endpoints of massive subspace tunnels called the Wargates that let Orks endlessly pour into a star system like a green tidal wave. They were built by ripping apart entire planetoids and moons using gravitic nexuses to suck a world's mass into orbit and then mash it all together into a moon-sized murder ball. Once active, they could devour other planets to refuel. Each attack moon was different in design, but all were absurdly tough, shrugging off Imperial firepower and even exploding enemy ships by just touching them. The Imperium only managed to destroy one of these during the Battle of Port Sanctus, when its shields were dropped from overusing its main weapon. Even then, half of Segmentum Solar's fleet had to hurl itself at the beast. And here's the kicker, these weren't even the final form. The Orks were just experimenting there. The real goal? A full-fledged attack planet to wipe out Terra itself. But thankfully the beast of Olenor was defeated. And so, these are the biggest ever recorded Ork spacecrafts and voidcrafts. If we have missed some and you know more, then please use the text box below to share with us. Comment with proper dakka. Now if you like this video, then watch this other one too, the one in the end screens. And also hit the like button to support. And smash the subscribe button to be a part of Legio Notebook. Till the next time, take care, boys.